Thursdays with EYPC. My name is Terrence Jones. I am the regional director of this wonderful organization, and I'm joined with my colleague, Dr. Reginald Wells, who's one of our clinical supervisors. And we've also got our guest, Malira Green, who is the leader and visionary of Malira Transformations. We are going to get into a very, very, very good conversation today. We're going to be talking about trauma. We're going to be identifying trauma and giving you some strategies about how you can work with those who are experiencing a traumatic experience, or if you are experiencing one yourself, we're going to help you out and give you all the tools you need to get from point A to point B. But before we get into that, just want to let you know how you can reach us at EYPC. You can go to our website at ey4pc.com to learn all about our community mental health services in the Commonwealth of Virginia and the state of Georgia. You can also give us a call at 804-789-1314. Or if you need to get in contact with the National Counseling Crisis Hotline, you can call 988 and somebody is available to help you. But let's go ahead and get into it. Before we do, Malira, how you doing today, man? You doing good?
I am wonderful today. I will not complain at all. I'm just glad to be here.
Awesome. I see the DST on your shirt. I figured you'd be at your conference. You know, you guys where are you guys, in Indianapolis right now?
Yeah, so there's this big conference happening. So I have this on because I'm super ecstatic. My high school is having a humongous reunion, and we have marching band practice tonight. And I'm like this little kid that's just so ready to utilize it as a coping strategy. So normally I'm very low key, but this was like the one look I thought will really kind of help me connect with some people.
Awesome. Well, shout out to Delta Sigma Theta. Hope you ladies are enjoying your time in Naptown. But Malira, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell our listening audience, what is Malira Transformations? Because we were just talking, and it offers a lot of things. So let everybody know what you do and what Malira Transformations does.
Absolutely. So my name is Malira Green. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by trade, but I am genuinely just a servant at heart. Right now, I am a certified complex trauma professional that serves as a psychotherapist, a life coach, a Reiki master, and a transformative speaker. I do have two companies. One is M Green Enterprises LLC, where we go into the workplace and we help heal it by starting at the leadership down. I'm a big believer that we spend a lot of our time at work, and it's important to have conducive environments to make sure that every person can excel. Then I have the Metamorphosis Healing Experience. That's more of my individual. So when I work with people one-on-one and do their coaching, I believe that I can help them become unstuck and motivated to reach their goals confidently, because all of us was born with some form of purpose, and that is what we do. And I literally just become whatever in the moment is necessary for me to become, because when I die, I want suicide to die with me, which is why dealing with trauma is so important for me in this time.
Yeah, wow. That sounds pretty noble. And I'm glad you're reaching out and helping our communities in that way. And you brought up trauma. So let's get right into it. Trauma is one of those words that there's been a lot of words since, I would say, COVID. There've been a lot of psychiatry and psychological terms that have been thrown around. The general public has some understanding about this stuff, but we want to make sure they have a clear understanding, so they know what they're working with. So tell us a little bit about what trauma is and what are some of the symptoms that someone who is going through a traumatic experience or coming out of one, what are some of the things that we as partners and friends can look out for, so we can help those who are going through that time?
So I like to use non-clinical terms because 90% of most people actually experience a trauma, but because we define it with such big words, people don't realize that their experiences is indeed trauma.
Right.
So a trauma is any foreseen situation that sticks with you after the situation has happened. So that can be something as big as an accident, going to war, unpredicted death. Those pieces could be very traumatic. But then I also explain to people we have the little T's, and the little T's are those things that we kind of brush underneath the rug that we don't even realize is traumatizing, like not having our basic needs met, only being able to eat your free lunch at school, sometimes coming home hungry. It could be bullying. It could be those things that people make us feel like it's just a part of life and we should just keep going with it. But for some people, it stays with you. I explain trauma as, I don't know if people remember, but back in the day in movies, they used to have the travelers have this big map and they would put like red pins everywhere that they went.
Yep.
That is trauma. When a trauma happens, you're putting a red pin in that moment, and every situation or circumstance that happens after that, we literally deal with it through the lens of that moment, of that situation. So that is how I define trauma. It's anything that sticks with you after it has already resolved itself. And that may stick with you in your character. It may stick with you in your decision making. It may stick with you with your coping strategies, your communication skills, your relationships. So it's anything that bleeds into your life after it's over. And for you, it's something that you feel was unprecedented. It's something that you didn't really want to happen. That's how I define trauma.
I like that definition. And I want to go back to something that you said because you talked about big T and little t. And I know a lot of times when we are listening to people, sometimes it's just regular human beings, and someone is telling us a story about something that left a traumatic response from them. We may look at it and say, well, hey, it's not that big. Um, Talk a little bit about how can you not minimize someone's experience because it's not big to you. So someone may have grown up in poverty, that might be big to them, but someone else, their generational line has grown up in poverty, so it's really not that big, and they can't really connect with someone who would think that's a traumatic experience. Talk about that for a little bit. How can we get
Yeah.
out of just assuming what is traumatic and what is not?
So empathy starts with you. We have to understand that we all have experienced something that triggers in the now what we don't really want.
Mhm.
So the one thing that I've experienced is I always tell people, if you've never been hungry, how can you feed somebody who's starving?
Right.
So when we are talking about, let's say, clinical people who are here to work with our clients, if you haven't been through anything, it's going to be really hard for you to be empathetic and see beyond that. The big T's are the things that we know about: sexual abuse and assault, child abuse and neglect. Like, we know how to function there. But do we really know how to function when a kid is coming to us talking about bullying? Do we know how to function when a kid is talking to us about how their mom has to work 2 and 3, 4, 5 jobs just to put food on the table?
Right.
If I haven't had my own experience of struggle, and I'm not saying everybody needs to have a trauma in their life, but if I have not acknowledged my own parts of my story that may not have been the best, it's going to be really hard for me to even care about putting myself in your shoes to even go beyond. And
Mhm.
then, secondly, I tell people we need to stop looking at definitions of things and really just hear that person's story and heart,
That's good.
because what may impact you may not impact me, and what may be big to me may not be big to you. So
Right.
when someone is coming to you and they're telling you, hey, this is impacting me, instead of me thinking in the lens of this is how I will handle it, I'm gonna think in the lens of, okay, so what are we gonna do about it together?
Mhm.
What can I teach you of how to get with this?
Mhm.
Because I do believe in Maslow hierarchy of needs. We expect for people to be at the top at self-actualization. What
Mhm.
is self-actualization? That is, I'm finally reaching my goals, my dreams, and my aspirations. I'm living my best self. I'm in my career that I want. I have the family I want. Like, life is just amazing because I pursued it.
Right.
But before we can get there, there's levels to this, and the first two are the most important.
Right.
That's number one, basic needs. So in the helping profession, we used to helping people with food, shelter, water, and air. But even sex lives down there. So we're not having conversations about people intimacy and relationships. We're missing a part of basic needs because that bleeds into the second level, which is safety and security. Security is not about being actually in a safe environment. It's about, do I feel like I belong?
Mhm.
And there's so many people, because of their trauma, don't feel like they belong in the spaces that they're at. So it's difficult for me to expect them to do well in school. It's difficult for me to expect them to excel in the workplace because they don't have a space for them to actually belong. So I think if we begin to have this space of accepting that everybody's journey is different, everybody's story is different, how we actually navigate life is going to be different based off of the knowledge that we have from our upbringing, from the exposure. I know for me, I became a therapist because I needed one growing up, but that wasn't something that my family talked about. Guess what? Now I'm in therapy, my husband in therapy, both my kids in therapy, and we in couples therapy. Why? Because I now know the importance of having that safe place. So we just have to respect where people are and stop judging them or placing labels on them because we don't understand it. It's not for us to understand their problem. It's just our responsibility to hold their hand through it while they solve it. That's it.
Yeah, yeah. Dr. Wells, I want you to chime in on that because I heard some strategies of what Malara was talking about. But what are your thoughts about that? How can we really as a community practice better empathy so the traumatic effects can be a little less for those who are going through it?
That one thing she mentioned as far as belonging is a big one. I was talking to some families earlier from an educational standpoint. They're moving into a community and it's different for them simply because of the fact that they don't feel like they actually belong in that community from an economical standpoint. And they've been more moving from one place to the next because they're a military family. That's a struggle for them.
Yeah.
So we're talking about something that most people may even counter as minuscule. I think one of the key things that she mentioned was our ability to change our whole thought process behind that. Change our thought process behind therapy. And let's be honest, we've talked about this several times when we've done these therapy talk Thursdays of our communities understanding trauma. I came from a family event this weekend, and some of those intimate conversations that happen where we talk about some things of the past, people's understandings now have understanding of trauma has changed. Because I remember those same individuals having those previous conversations. What was considered as, oh, that was just me going through this because that's what grandma went through, that's what great granddad went through. That can change where people say, no, wait a minute, that has a major effect on people.
Right.
So, like she says, we've got to come in and take away a lot of the, I won't say stigma, but it's more of those semantic words and those long phrases and just get down to the basics of it and re-educate people. And that's something that has to be something that goes on for a period of time. Because without that, we're kind of on that hamster wheel and we just keep going. Trauma can be one of those things where we've talked about before, something as simple as 5 years old, I fell off the bed. And now every time that person gets on a high place, that memory sticks in their head and they can't shut it off because the brain is saying you're in danger and it can't stop that thought. It can't stop that feeling of being in fight or flight. So.
Yeah, no, you're right. My youngest daughter's 1-year-old birthday, she reached out and touched the candle, and she's 8 now, and the way she views fire is still a certain way because of how that was at 1. But you both bring up something, and this is because this has been a conversation in a lot of circles I've been around because of the age of my children, and it's when you guys bring up belonging, and often in our community, we have to choose between the school with the adequate and the better resources, or the school in the community that's going to make my child feel like they belong, that the teachers care, that the principals care. And as I'm thinking about this and going through it, and I'm thinking about what you guys were saying, it always begs the question for a lot of parents in our culture, I'm sure, do I have to choose between which one lessens the traumatic experience for my child? Is it the school that might be a little rougher, but I know the teachers love my kids, or the school that has all the resources you need, but I know the teachers really don't care about my kids? And you don't want to set your kids up for that type of trauma or the possibility of trauma, but it is a real thing. Malara, are you familiar with that? Have you, does that sound, odd, or what do you think?
It's not odd, and I actually do work in the schools, and I do have 2 young children, and what I tell parents is all the time, regardless of any decision you make, whether you are a present or a not present parent, your kid is going to always have what my good friend and aunt Quinea Futrell says, a why my mom's story, a why my dad's story. And when we understand that, the only thing that I will tell parents is make the best decision, but with your kids' input. I think, and we just actually had this conversation last night. I do mental moments with my girlfriend, Natasha Owens, on Instagram every Wednesday. And we talked about that. We talked about the upcoming school year. And we had my husband on, who's a 7th grade civics teacher. And we had Danielle on, who is a supervisor for special education. And the one thing we talked about is like, how do we bridge that gap between parents and children? And I said, that's the problem. We define adult and child. Now, go with me here because it's going to answer your question.
Okay.
Before we decided to say adult and child, and, you know, I'm not going to get very biblical. I want to stay with the mental, but adulthood started when we entered into adulthood, meaning when the women finally had their cycle and when the young boy had what young boys have, right? Now we put an age on it.
Okay.
So up until you get 18, now is a dictatorship. Every adult is going to tell you how to live, how to move, how to breathe. We tell you all the things not to do. Don't go get drugs. Don't have sex. Don't go talk to this person. Don't hang with that person. And then we tell you how to move. You need to go to this school, that school. But that individual and that kid is still an individual with their own mindset, their own desires, their own things. So one thing I will tell parents is when it comes to those really important conversations, bring your child to the table and hear what they say. Your kid might don't care about if the teacher cares about them or not, because they may be very independent and their thing is, I just want a good education. So it's not about me connecting with my teacher or my classmates. I just want to make sure that I get to college and this is going to be the best school. Or you may have that kid that's saying, I don't care about having the best education. I care about having the best experience. And when you both bring your mindsets together, that would eliminate some of the pressure that we put ourselves in as parents. We think that we're the one that is the all in all decision maker. And I'm sorry to tell you, that has not been the best parenting strategy that's been passed down. It is best when you actually get the input from the student, from your child, because they are the ones that's actually going to go to school. They're the ones that's going to put in the effort. So what I would hate to do is make a decision and send my kids to the best school and then they flunk out because they're not invested. Right. And then I would hate to send them to the school about belonging where all their friends look like them, the teachers look like them, but then they're not getting nothing from it because they want the education. So it just takes kind of that communication and conversation between parent and child. Everything is age specific too. There's some ages that they may not know. So of course you're going to make some decisions. But for those middle schoolers and high schoolers, incorporate your children in your decision-making practices, and some of the things that you are stressed out about, they will be able to give you an answer of what they think is most important. Then y'all come do a pros and cons list. I tell people whichever one is the longest, that's the one you want to consider. If there's more cons, then we might not want to go that route. But if there's more pros, then we need to see if the cons are worth it. And that's kind of how I help my parents navigate those types of decision-making when it comes to their young people.
That's good. That's good. Guys, we're at Therapy Talk Thursdays. We're here with Malira Green of Malira Transformations. Malira, what would you give, or what strategies would you give to someone who says, hey, look, I am neck deep in a traumatic experience. This thing is on my mind all day. I need to build up my resilience. What are some strategies that you would give that person to help them be resilient as they navigate through this process?
So number one, awareness is everything. When you are aware that there is something even serving as a barrier, I always tell my clients, kudos to you, because it starts there. Change does not occur until you acknowledge the impact of it. That's number one. Then once you become aware, you have to ask yourself, where am I in the stages of change? Like so this is the example I like to give people. Sometimes our responses to trauma serves us. What do I mean by that? For me, I've had a lot of trauma, which is why I got into this field. but food was a coping strategy for me. And at one point, it served me. No matter how much weight I wanted to lose, no matter what I wanted to do, when I went and I got my little cookie from 7-Eleven and I sat down, I felt good. And then afterwards, I didn't. I have to deal with, what does this trauma response serve for me? I tell people change only happens when I hate how it makes me feel. So once I've acknowledged that there's something that needs to change, I now need to hate how the response to it makes me feel. And then I need to go get some help. Therapy is normal, y'all. The same way we go to our doctor and get an annual done all the time, go to a therapist. We all deserve to have someone that we can use as a trash can to dump our stuff out. And then that good therapist is going to take it out and dump it out with the rest of the trash. So then you can now be empty. Because sometimes what ends up happening, we try to heal ourselves from the trauma, and then we end up getting further into the trauma. Because we're going to attract what we focus on. So if I'm so focused on, I don't want this life anymore, guess what? You're going to have that life, because that's what I focus on. The example I like to give is when I had my old vehicle, it was a red Sentra. And when I first bought it, I didn't see anybody with no red Sentra. I was like, hey, they say Deltas always got Nissans. And I said, I want a red one. Before I got home, I saw.
Wait, they say that? I've never heard that. They really say that.
So before I got home, I literally saw 7 of the same car. Why? Because my focus was so excited on the fact that I had this brand new car. Right. The same happens with the negative. If I tell myself I don't want to be like my mom, how many clients have you had that ends up being like, wait, I'm just like my mother? And it's because I only focus on I don't want to be like her, right, instead of focusing on what I do want. Right. So those are some of the strategies: is acknowledgement, beginning to get to a point where I don't like how it feels, and then actually going out and getting the help so that you can actually change what you focus on. If I find myself saying I don't want to live this life, I'm going to live that life. Yeah. But when I find myself actually having a vision of what I want my life to look like in the future, it makes it a little bit more bearable, because now I can dream out loud. I can see myself living something different. I can see myself not being stuck anymore. I can see myself beyond this trauma. And then lastly, being able to, and one thing I always say, there's this apology that I read, and I'm going to pull it up. It's really quick. But I tell people, even if that person doesn't apologize to you, having a space of forgiveness for yourself, or reaching a space of understanding that it was not your fault, really helps people move forward. So if there's anybody who listens to this, just in case you're not moving forward because that person apologized, I'm going to take a quick moment really quickly to do that for you. Dear survivors, you are more than enough. Your life experiences do not define who you are, but cultivate your very essence. Suppose you never have received an apology from the person who hurt you. In that case, I take the time out to send a heartfelt apology on their behalf. You deserve to be free from the entrapment of their egregious actions. I apologize for the years of pain you have endured due to that moment of stolen innocence, neglect, pain, and hurt you will never get back. I apologize for all the decisions and actions you made that were more detrimental to your well-being or that of others due to trying to find normalcy again. I apologize for the years you spent in bondage trying to figure out what you did to attract such experiences. I apologize for the years of self-love you missed out on because the message you kept hearing was that you did not deserve love. Please know you were only a victim in the moment. But as I read this to you, my friend, you are a survivor. And just like survivors of major illnesses get celebrated when they go into remission, I celebrate you today because you are no longer a victim. You are the best you there is. Now walk in your freedom.
Now, I hope somebody who is in the fire right now was able to receive that for themselves. And as you were reading that, I'm thinking that a person may be like, well, that's great, Malira, but I want that person to apologize to me. That may be true. However, to be able to have someone reach out and sort of stand in the gap for that person, let that serve as what it serves right now. Live in the moment that you're getting an apology and an acknowledgement. Who knows if you'll see that person that's going to apologize to you or not. But just sit in this moment right now so you can receive what just happened. In fact, I want to go back and go a little bit deeper because, Malara, when you talk about acknowledgement, there's a component of that which generally is referred to as sitting in that thing, just sitting in it. As men, we like to put that thing in the closet. That's where the skeletons in the closet thing comes from. Not so much that the behavior or the situation can be hidden from everyone else, but also so it can be hidden from us, so we don't got to deal with it. How would you encourage someone, whether that period is 5 minutes, 10 minutes, to just sit in that thing, in that process of acknowledgement, and how does that help a person then be able to turn the corner and say, okay, I actualize this, I realize this now. Does it encourage me to go get help, or what can I do when I sit in that thing for a little bit?
So when we begin to sit in just the acknowledgement that life has happened, right? It's being able to give myself permission to feel what I feel.
Good.
So in that moment, if I want to cry, I'm going to cry. In that moment, if I'm mad, I'm going to go punch that pillow. In the moment, I give yourself permission to feel whatever it is that you feel, because once I allow for myself to feel, I now stop feeding my elephant.
Mm-hmm.
So what ends up happening is I have this thing that's called the elephant in the room.
Okay.
When we are experiencing trauma in life and we don't deal with the emotions that come at the time the trauma happens, then what we do is we throw it away in the trash and says, hey, I'm not going to worry about it. And where do we get that from? Growing up, if you're not happy and you start crying, I used to hear, I'm going to give you something to cry about. You throw that temper tantrum. It's like, what you mad for? You got food, shelter, and water. So anything outside of happy, I am conditioned to not feel or not to acknowledge. But there's this elephant that we all have. An elephant has the world's best memory. It remembers almost majority of its life from the time of it being born until the time that it dies. So our elephants sit there, and every time we say, I'm not going to deal with it, the elephant eats whatever feelings and emotions we toss to the side. Until eventually it gets so big, the elephant kicks us out of our room. And that's what happened during COVID. We all was in this space of denying how impactful it was, denying how traumatic certain things was. So now you have all these people seeking for mental health support. And it's because emotionally, I don't know how to deal with it. So I tell people, start with acknowledging your true, raw emotion. How do I feel? Why do I feel this way? Being okay with being mad at a person. What I tell people is emotions aren't good or bad. It's what I do with it. I know some happy people that do some crazy things with their happiness.
Yep.
And I know some really mad people that do some great things with their madness, right?
Yeah.
So because of that, once I acknowledge, there is one activity that I encourage people to do, and it's called the Inner Child Healing Letter. It is all stemmed in brain science. You're going to bring into your subconscious and your conscious. And what ends up happening is when we're talking about trauma or a scenario, you want to use the hand that you do not write with, so the non-dominant hand, and then you want to write dear, and then whoever that person is that was a part of the situation. If there was no actual specific person a part of the situation, you could just put dear car accident, dear whatever happened. From there, and a lot of people are like, this is so uncomfortable, I feel like I'm writing as a child. That is the point.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us in our unconscious has this balled up child that's there, that's screaming for protection.
Mm-hmm.
What this letter does scientifically helps that child stand up. So when you sit there and you're finally dealing with your raw emotions, you're going to do dear, whatever you're going to write to, and just write without thought, no judgment, pour out until you feel like you're empty. Nobody will ever see this letter. The next step of the Inner Child Healing Letter is you're going to read that letter silently to yourself, not out loud. When I read it silently to myself, I'm allowing for this inner child to know that you're safe. Nobody needs to know your secret. I know the secret. So I'm going to read it silently to myself. Once I'm complete with that, I'm going to move to my dominant hand. Your dominant hand is attached to your resilient self, the you that got you to today. Then you're going to write dear, then your name. So I'll put dear Malira. And then I'm going to say what got me to this point. And I'm going to write a letter of resiliency to myself, empowerment. So when I do have a trauma reminder, I can go to this letter that I either keep in my wallet, that I have on my phone or something, but I'm going to write a letter of power. Before I read that letter of power out loud, I need to get rid of the secret. So then you're going to destroy the first letter, read the second letter out loud, and then you're going to keep that second letter. That helps me now get out all of this stuff so I'm not hurting anybody else. I'm being real and raw with my true emotion and feeling. And I'm destroying it to represent that this no longer has power over me. So that is one of the activities that I do in real time with my clients, because it does allow for them to finally have a safe place to just dump without judgment. I never hear your true raw emotions and feelings unless they want to say something about it. And then now they have something to keep with them in the moments where they are low. They can take out their phone and read the letter to themselves. They can take it out of their wallet, their purse, and read it to themselves. And I have seen that as helpful for in the beginning for people who are still holding really intense emotions and don't know what to do with it.
That sounds incredibly helpful. We're going to offline. I want to make sure I get all the instruction of that. We probably use it to help some other people. That's great. That's outstanding. Therapy Talk Thursdays, talking all things trauma, talking about how to live through it, how to get over it, how to overcome it. Dr. Wells, I want to throw this to you. What are some ethical considerations when we as mental health professionals work with individuals who have experienced trauma? And the reason I bring that up is because there are a lot of things that people experience and have a traumatic experience that's tied to it, that are private or even embarrassing, or it makes me, really feel like a low person. So what are some of the ethical considerations for mental health professionals in working with somebody like that?
So I'm about to say something that I'm almost certain Miss Green is going to immediately say, nod her head. If you cannot deal with the situation, if it triggers anything within yourself that becomes problematic with you as a professional, refer and do not delay. There are a lot of people, especially when they're first coming into the field, that automatically come in with the I'm come here to save the world. And the issue as a certified professional counsel supervisor, how many times I've come across, and you pick up on that from the jump until they run into someone dealing with specific trauma that triggers their own issues, and they haven't done their work. And what you start to notice is a shift in how they're speaking to others, how they're writing, all of those things. So one of those things, if you don't have the backing, if you don't have the training, if you don't feel comfortable with it, refer. Don't try to go in and do some work with that. The second thing is that it's very important that if we do realize that it has been something that points to the symptoms of trauma, immediately we need to get someone that can come in, do an assessment, that can check, because again, as we talked about earlier, being able to recognize what is trauma, that's the first thing. I've seen so many therapy sessions where you start to read through notes and go, wait a minute, has there been an assessment done? Has there been something discussed dealing with trauma? And the moment you hear no, you're more seasoned individual, they go into panic mode, like, oh, what have we done? Where most likely we haven't really addressed what, we've done some surface things, and that's normally going to happen when you first begin. But as you start to do that deeper work, and you're not addressing some of those areas, you can do more harm than good, because that person still feels like, well, I can't talk about this. I can't deal with this. So it's important that if once you begin to recognize those things, you want to go ahead and begin to offer those resources, address those things, and make sure that even with your plans that they are, if it's not jumping right into it, refer them to someone that can provide that help.
Yeah. So Malara, and thanks for that, Dr. Wells. Piggybacking off his answer, what if I'm a person and, when I was younger, I was really involved in street life and I did some really bad things that, I'm not proud of. And even though I may have done time or it might pass the statute of limitations, everything, I still have difficulty talking to a therapist about it because I'm afraid that therapist, I hear this thing, mandated reporter. I'm afraid that the therapist might do some things that will violate my privacy, but also could put me in jail. How can you help someone get over that? Because it's eating them alive, but they really need to get to the issue, need to talk about it so they can move on and live a productive life.
So I smile because those are typically my type of clients.
Okay.
I work with the clients that most people would shun. So I have a plethora of schizophrenic clients. I have a plethora of clients that do have records, that's been in the military, that has done and seen things that I probably have never done or seen. But this is my rule of thumb. If it is not posing a present risk of safety, then your secret is safe with me. That's how I function. So we do have, so I'm going to put this out here for any person who is looking for therapy. We do have this thing called confidentiality. That means most of what you say to us is held confidential. And we say most because we do have some limitations. That's if you tell me you are thinking about killing yourself or harming yourself, if you're thinking about killing somebody else or harming somebody else, if you report to me child abuse of someone when they are still a child, they are still a minor, not child abuse where you are an adult and then you're telling me about your childhood trauma, I'm not going to open up a CPS case. And if you tell me active APS, then I also have to report those. Outside of that, unless you are a mandated client where your contract says I have to report X, Y, and Z information, Malira does not report X, Y, and Z information because my name is Bennett and I'm not in it. The reason why I do it in that way is because you have those people who have done some things, that are currently doing some things, that need a safe place to just share whatever's happening. It is not my role as your therapist to judge you, nor to condone what you're doing. So I'm not going to be this yes person like, oh, you told me you just stole that car last week. And I'm just going to be like, oh, okay, that's so great. You stole that car. No, I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say, well, what in the ham sandwich were you thinking about? I build that rapport with my clients and I understand the why they even came to me. So it's important for clinicians to know the referral source.
Right.
Because sometimes the referral source will say, hey, they can't do any drugs, or hey, they have to function as in this way, or they can't see their kids right now. Now, when it's those types of cases and you report them to me, then you know that I am going to be what I call essentially a snitch because I told you up front. So as a clinician, we have to be aware of the limitations to our relationship and have that conversation with our client so then they can be open and honest. Like right now, I work with some kiddos that do have illegal activity. But because it's not actively hurting anybody and they're processing the why they're doing it and all those things, it is not my responsibility unless, again, I think there's a safety risk or concern for me to call the authorities and say this person is doing X, Y, and Z, unless I am mandated to do that. And I think as clinicians, we blur the lines. That's even like with documentation. I document as if somebody's reading it in court. So this person can sit here and talk about their mama and their daddy, but I'm not going to say mommy and daddy. I'm going to say clinicians spoke with client about relationship patterns. Right. Why? Because when we're in the middle of court and you probably just told this person you love them and then they read my note and I talk about how much you hated them, I document in that way. That's another piece of the confidentiality, learning how to cover your assets, but then also cover your client's assets to build that level of rapport that's needed. But both parties need to know the limitations to what I do need to report and what I don't need to report. And that's very important.
Yeah, it is very important. Information at the beginning is critical. Knowing where your client, knowing where you stand is critical. Knowing where your client stands is critical. I do want to say for anyone who's listening to part of that, civilians can't snitch. Only criminals can snitch. Civilians, they're civilians. They can say what they want to say. But therapists do have your best interests at heart. And even if they do have to allow information, they're not snitching on you because they're civilians. Now, it's your homeboy that said is going to drive you to do whatever, and then he tells on you. That's the snitch. But the therapist is not the snitch. The therapist is there to help you process while you're in that activity, with the hope that you will turn around on that activity and leave it where it is. So want to make that clear. Don't think your therapist is against you. Therapists and civilians cannot snitch. You got to know that. Got to know that. I want to wrap up with this question. We're going into school. Millions of kids across the nation will be going back into schools and school settings. There are hundreds of thousands of kids who had a tough summer with eating, left in tough neighborhoods and broken family situations. And then they're going back to school where that might be their source of a steady meal, adults that they can trust and things of that nature, but they're carrying their summer experiences with them. So I'd like for both of you to answer this question. And Dr. Wells, I ask you first. Educating our teachers, our school counselors, our coaches, what role can that play in creating awareness and understanding of trauma, again, for both the professionals, for the parents, and for the general public?
I really hope that that's something that is automatically popping into the heads of those who are heads of administrators, whether it's in your after school programs, all those things of just training people and that being a ongoing thing. Because I have a mindset where every time school starts, I think of it like a rubber band being pulled back, because a lot of these kids, let's be honest, and since last academic year, for example, just talking about school, how many kids' lives were taken before they even went to the prom, or the shooting that happened at the graduation, all those things that occurred. And now those kids are coming back to that environment, whether it's school, after school programs, where the after school program had to close because there was something that was major that happened. So one of the things that's going to be very key is hoping that you get that training with your teachers and your after school people and your 4-H club leaders, and everyone being involved in that. For example, Miss Green is a part of a sorority. Sororities, you're starting to hear that more, where a lot of those individuals are going and they're volunteering somewhere, and then they're recognizing something. They say, "Look, it's not my field, but I know one of my sorors told me if I see this, this is the steps you take." And making that something that's prolonged. I'm not sure if it's Delta. I know there's one group that actually has made that a priority in the HBCUs in Atlanta, because they know they were in an area, they were in a neighborhood where they saw that stuff happening. A lot of the shooting, a lot of young girls that were coming in and saying, "Look, I just left my 27-year-old boyfriend. Baby, how old are you?" "I'm 13. Something's wrong here." So being able to make sure that we're training people, we're providing those resources. If we don't have those immediate ones where we can go into our business or that school, we can then go and say, "Hey, here's the place where you go for that." And just making sure that it's available down to the churches. Because one thing that I've learned is that you have a lot of people that don't have a clear understanding of, yeah, let's pray to deal with it, but let's do the work that goes along with it. Mm-hmm. Hey, if you're the one that did it, let's pray to deal with it. There's some consequences that may come behind this. So being able to, do the work that goes along with it, that's very important.
Yeah, I'm familiar with a lot of organizations that, they'll be at a school when the kids get there. They have their lines and giving high fives and just really pumping the students up. And from what I've heard, it always seems that type of thing has a positive impact of just getting the kids ready for the day, no matter what school, no matter what community. When they know that their community members care, they seem to feel and produce better, at least for that school day, and a lot of situations throughout the year. But what about instilling that confidence in that teacher? That teacher is there to teach biology, but the kids that are dealing with trauma, it passed the eye test, and he or she may not be confident to have those initial conversations. Malira, what would you say to that teacher? How would you help that teacher build confidence so they can know how to step in and do some of the things that Dr. Wells is talking about with connecting with mental health organizations in their community or in their school.
So one of my favorite quotes by Les Brown is, "You don't have to be great to get started, but you do have to get started to be great." And there comes a point where lack of knowledge becomes an excuse.
Mm-hmm.
I would recommend all teachers, all parents, all human beings with a brain to take mental health first aid. And a lot of the times, your local community services boards will offer that class either for free or a reduced price if it's for a big organization. So if your school district is investing in professional development, then we need to do mental health first aid training. That's number one.
Yeah, that's
Two,
good.
in my dream world, I feel like the first month of classes should be about social and emotional reconnectivity with our students. But what ends up happening is after the first week, we jump right into curriculum and we act as if a summer didn't just happen.
Right.
So if schools could at least either do some type of a program or have some mentors or have some volunteers in the classrooms to help the teachers navigate them becoming more acclimated. Because here's the thing, all of our students are 2 years behind because of COVID. So our seniors essentially mentally are sophomores.
Right.
You know, so we have to understand that there has been a complete rift. So if we can start with the training to gain the knowledge, then our teachers will be more confident. And then two, as well, is as parents, we have to play a role in our children's lives. Trust me, I get it. Everybody's busy. I don't know anybody that don't got more than 2 jobs. I just don't. I don't know anybody who just, do whatever. So what I would say is parents also becoming invested in understanding the role of trauma with their kids. Us not being afraid to say I'm sorry. Us not being afraid to tap in. My 4-year-old told me, "Mommy, you're mean." And I was like, "Wait, what I do?" And then he explained it. He said, "Well, when you take my tablet when I'm not listening." So then I was like, okay, well, now he gets to explain. Even having a little conversation with my 4-year-old is now making sure that he's not traumatized because me taking his tablet, which is his livelihood, to him, I don't think that's traumatic. You should have listened. For him, it might be growing up, my mom always took my stuff. So us just having those level of conversations. So if the education system as a whole can come together, have the training so that they're knowledgeable about it. I know here in Norfolk, Virginia on August the 3rd, we're having an all-day training. And that is what my workshop is on, is trauma, how to acknowledge trauma inside the classroom. And the biggest part about it is not minimizing the stories that our students tell us either.
Right.
I work in a school, and a lot of the times the teachers don't believe the students.
Yeah.
The parent don't believe the student. So now the student is telling me what they're dealing with and what they're struggling with. So some of the kids just need an open forum to kind of share. But resources that is available to the school system. Number one, community service boards, community service boards, community service boards. If you have not heard of community service boards, when you call the 988 number, they're going to connect you with your local community service board, because those are the individuals that's going to assess your level of risk. What ends up happening, a lot of times people say, well, this kiddo don't have insurance or they have commercial. Community Services Board accept all insurance and those who are non-insured. Why? Because they're state funded and they cannot turn anybody away. They're one-stop shops. So if someone needs a case manager because their basic needs aren't met, it's right there. If someone needs a therapist, if someone has a substance abuse issue, if they need parenting classes or any of those things, transportation, that is in most of the cities here in the state of Virginia. So there is no reason why our schools do not have connections with those people. And to those who are in leadership, contract private practices to come in the school during school time. Kids don't have time to come to a therapist after 5 o'clock, after they then did football practice, parents, and all that stuff. If you have someone that come in, I'd rather them miss an hour of instruction than to miss 10 days because they've been suspended because nobody spent time to actually talk with them. So we just have to change our mindset behind mental health And then also for leadership, cover your teachers, man.
Mhm.
I know so many people who are in leadership that is tearing down the little bit of handful of teachers that we do have because of testing scores, because of kids' behavior, because of everything. Everybody is acting out right now because COVID put us all in survival mode.
Mhm.
So the teachers is acting out, the kids is acting out, the parents is acting out, admin is acting out, and somebody has to be mature enough to say, enough is enough. Let's try something different. Bring the students to the table. They'll tell you what they need to make the school a better place.
Yeah.
Bring the parents to the table. The parents will tell you, I want to help Johnny or whoever, but I can't because I'm working 3 jobs just to put food on my table. What resources do you have for me? So this is not just a school problem. This is a society problem where we all need to start with education.
Yeah.
Once we can understand the role of mental health, then we can understand the impact of trauma. Then we'll stop misdiagnosing our Black and brown little people with ADHD when it's actually PTSD and stop giving them medication that's further input in their brains. It literally starts with knowledge. Once we have the knowledge, we can come together and provide the resources necessary to make sure that those people have what they need.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, we've all probably been in a conversation about how our school systems need to infuse financial literacy and other economic programs in our schools, ownership, taxes, and things of the sort, which I do think is important and it does need to happen. But along with that, we all know, or we may all know, very wealthy people who have a very difficult time managing their feelings. Malara, you said earlier there are some people who've been through really bad things, and they turn those into great things. And so and just for notoriety purposes, you take someone like a Jay-Z who grew up poor, grew up in a drug-infested area, but over the course of time managed to turn that into a multi-million-dollar business and multi-million-dollar net worth. He took something bad and made it good, but there are a million Sean Carters. There's only really one Jay-Z. So adding those things in the curriculum, I'm almost sure, and I can't speak for every school system across the country, but I can speak for Henrico County and Richmond City and Chesterfield, that there's room to do that. There's absolutely room to make sure those things happen. But it goes back to, again, how important does the superintendent think and the school board think about these things that really could help change a lot of lives. And that covering teacher part that you're talking about, that's part of what makes that happen. Look, a safer child makes for a more safer feeling teacher. If a child doesn't feel safe, then that child has the higher potential to lash out, and that will be poured out on the teacher. And then the teacher feels undervalued, definitely underpaid, and may not feel safe, and then that teacher is out of there.
Yep.
So yeah, I agree with you. I think these things need to be in place. They can be in place. And I'm gonna share a little optimism. I think with everything that has happened, I don't put the pin at COVID. I put the pin actually at the school shooting phenomenon. When things started trickling a little downhill, and then COVID was that dive downhill. So I think a lot of people's hearts and minds were conditioned to be overstimulated by trauma already. But now, it's like we don't have a choice. We've got enough evidence of what society has done for people. We've seen it play out in our schools where teachers are leaving by the droves. Yeah, we can do this. We can do this. It's not even that hard. There's private providers everywhere. This can happen.
It's necessary. It's partnership. It is allowing for people to say, I don't have all the answers.
Right.
I'm grateful that I've had the opportunity to do some of the things that I've been able to do. So like I had 3 middle schools this past school year where I went for a few hours each week and I provided 30-minute, what I would call behavioral health support, because sometimes it's not even just therapy. Sometimes just having somebody to come and kick it. For some of my students, I just played their favorite song and music and they drew, and I just created a safe place. So I think it's definitely necessary. The money is out there.
Absolutely.
It's just making sure that the structure is right. And I think that is some of the people that is really, that is some of the things that is missed, is really us having that partnership and us connecting with one another to
Yeah.
making sure that our students, our teachers, our parents, our communities get what we need. If
Yeah.
we don't do that, we're going to have more shootings. If we don't do that, we're going to have more suicides. It don't have nothing to do. Listen, I know that different socioeconomic statuses have different barriers,
Mhm.
but we have the same blood and the same mind processes. The only difference is some people focus on the one thing they don't have, and some people focus on all the things they do have, regardless of what environment. We
Yeah.
just lost Twitch, who had millions of dollars, just celebrated an anniversary, had all of it, and he took his life.
Yep.
You know, then we have someone who's homeless that's living their best life because their mindset. If we can literally condition this to see, then we can see through our eyes the thing that we want to see, which is peace, justice, and happiness above all, and making sure that our kids and our students are successful. So I always tell people, you can thrive beyond trauma. I am a product of trauma, but I chose to see the actual light at the end of the tunnel. And my hope is that this conversation today educated some people, inspired some people. And if you are in a role of leadership, get educated about mental health, because you will be surprised once you know why people function how they function, how you can be a better leader.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just want to add, if you are an educator or a leader in education, get familiar with the private providers in your area. There are people who are equipped, who can put that structure together for your school and help you do the things that you just don't have time to do. Find out who they are. Contact with your community service board, your behavioral health authorities. People are available to help, and that's what we want to do. Nobody wants to go into a tough school year that's tough for everybody involved. Let's collaborate. Let's just collaborate. Malira, thank you so much for joining us, man. Drop your plug. How can people get in contact with you, with everything you got going on? What can they do?
Yeah, so you guys can go to www.malaratransforms.com. I am on Instagram, Malara Transforms. I also have a really dope series on YouTube under Transforming with Malira. Every week I do the Michael Collier Show, his relationship segment, where I really talk about relationships and love on Thursdays. If you just type my name in, you'll find me. But honestly, outside of me, y'all, at the end of the day, I want you to know that you are enough. I am a product of just choosing to live a different life. And I'm not saying it to minimize your story, I promise you. But what I'm telling you is, when you choose to live, you'll be able to be best. So my number is scrolling at the bottom. That number comes directly to my line. You can text it, you can call it. You do not have an excuse after this conversation to sit in your trauma by yourself, because we want to build people who can thrive beyond it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And look, don't forget to go to ey4pc.com. Take a look at our website. See if we have a service that can help you and help your family. Give us a call at 804-789-1314 if you want to speak to me or any of the wonderful team members here at EYPC. Look, make sure you join us next week, this same time at 2 p.m., as we continue Therapy Talk Thursdays. And share this video. Share this video with someone. Someone needs to hear this. Look, someone who's going through an experience needs to be encouraged. A school leader, a community leader needs to hear this, so they can be sparked to go ahead and seek out some community providers that can help them do what needs to be done. We're going to sign out here, but before we do, we always like to pray for everybody that's listening and pray for those who can be healed. So, Dr. Wells, man, I see you're doing work. Can you pause for just a second and pray for those who may be going through a traumatic experience, that they receive all the healing and the tools that they need so they can be productive as possible while they are here? Do you mind doing that, my brother?
Yes, sir. Everybody, bow your heads. Lord, we thank you again for the opportunity to present your information, your help, your resources, and the wonderful people that are doing the work, that are in the trenches. But we're praying for those who have watched this video and those who will share the information. with others that are in need, and that work will begin. We pray for those that are going into the school, the new year, that are going into the colleges, universities, Lord, but going back home from work even today, that those that are dealing with trauma understand that they can thrive, they can overcome. We thank you for the opportunity again in your name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Malara, thank you so much. We got to do this again.
My pleasure. I wouldn't mind. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, you
I
got
am hoping that we'll be able to dive in. I know that the list came up. Be prepared for a big one dealing with school and IEPs and 504s and what are needed. I've literally had 3 families I met with today that's like, I'm lost. So I know that's going to be a big one. So
yeah, it is going to be, as you all know, around August, September, October, parents are flooded with everything. And there's a lot of things that they can put their child into, but they're just confused and all over the place. So maybe we'll have you back, Malara, and we can talk about how a parent can deal with that type of stuff, because there's help for that too. There are people who are dedicated to help you, mom and dad, deal with those things so you don't get bogged down while your child is going back to school. So, hey guys, thank y'all for tuning in. We're going to get on out of here. You guys have a blessed and powerful week, and we will see you next Thursday. Share this video. See you guys soon.